Hi, folks. You're with Tassers today. Tassers today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the indoctrinated sort of college kid type syndrome, which is widespread, particularly with things like mass immigration. Everybody's a human being, or the Green New Deal and the planet's going to end and all this sort of stuff. But there's a sort of few things that came together at once, and I like to get separate incidents that sort of create really the same story and put them together. And so his is a kid, a boy. This is a young man. I don't know. There's something gay about this guy. I think he's sort of this dweeby type thing. And the only girls he hangs around with are these tiny little midget Asian girls, and he's a straight Anglo boy. Like he must be like 6'3" or 190 centimeters tall, and reasonably well built for a sort of kid that age, and yet he hangs around with these 45 kilogram, 95 pound little Asian chicks. But anyway, he's quite active in the greening the planet. The world's going to end and all that sort of thing. But he insists on, his folks who they're not rich, but they're doing pretty good, and they've bought him his own car, and he refuses to take public transport. He drives everywhere, but when he lives with his parents, and he gets free board, free food. He doesn't have to pay a cent. They contribute towards his his college fees. So he's got it. Compared to a lot of kids out there, he's got it pretty good. But he puts the air conditioning on. Now it's a decent sized house, and they've got the various areas. Like I think the house is divided into 4 or 5 zones for the air conditioning. He can close off an area if he wants to, but he just puts the air conditioning on for the whole house, and that's on for hours. He puts it on full blast, whether it be winter or summer, to cool or heat the house. And their electricity bill, even though they've got pretty decent solar, their electricity bill is just through the roof. And they keep asking him not to do it, and he goes, "Oh well, I like to be able to walk around in shorts and t-shirt, no matter what the weather like outside." But that comes at quite a price. But he shrugs his shoulders. He just ignores them and does the same thing. They sort of, the parents, because they can't afford it, so they take a view of, oh well, he's a cute little boy type thing. But they eventually got annoyed with it and said to him, "Hey, buddy, look, you can have everything else for free, but you have to pay the electricity bill." And I think they gave him some other thing like, say at the college canteen, you can buy like an account there, so that you can get spend $20 a day or something, buying sandwiches. And I think they set something like that up for him because they didn't actually want him to be out of pocket. They were trying to demonstrate to him that reality comes at a cost. Anyone can live a fantasy world where someone else pays all the bills and all the problems are pushed onto other people. That's the fantasy world. The reality is when you have to bear the consequences, you have to pay. And they thought that he should at least get a minor, small taste of this. And he'd be, I don't know, he's not, I doubt he'd even be 21. He's probably 20 years old. So, and so they said, okay, you got to pay the electricity bill. And they noticed a sudden change when the first bill came in. He began to cheat. He go, "Holy crap!" And he began to think about, okay, the reality is I have to pay this money. The reality is also I can not pay this money or pay less if I change my behaviour. And first he started off on only putting the zone of air conditioning on that was in his, where his room was, so that. That reduced the bill. And then he worked out that, because again they've got solar, he worked out that if he just especially in the cooler weather, if he just put on another layer of clothing, a sweatshirt or or just warmer clothing, then he wouldn't need to put the heating on until maybe later in the evening, that sort of thing. So he realised that he could actually reduce the electricity bill that he was now responsible for. He could reduce it to be just quite a small amount of money just by altering his behaviour. And given that he was the primary, if not the sole cause of the huge electricity bills, then so it just goes to show that when reality sort of slaps you in the face, that you're forced to, you're typically required to adjust your behaviour and adjust your perception of that reality. And that was a classic case of it. This happened just by telling him, you got to pay that bill. So that if you look at the college kids running around, placard waving and so on, I can't find any of those. I haven't met every single one of them, but certainly the ones I've come across, I haven't found a single one that has to take the responsibility for paying the energy bills. And that's significant. You find, the older people, the professional sort of elite class, they also live in a fantasy because their income is so substantial that it doesn't matter if their annual electricity bill goes from $5,000 to $10,000 or $10,000 to $20,000 or whatever it might be. It doesn't affect them. It's such a minor part of their overall income that they can afford to pay that just out of the loose change in their pockets. So they can still live the non-reality of this. Whereas, for a lot of households that are living paycheck to paycheck, having to go from $5,000 to $10,000 in electricity is a crushing extra burden and very materially alters their standard of living, their lifestyle, their quality of life, and so on. It means on the coldest days of winter, they can't afford to run the heating or on the hottest days of summer, run the air conditioning or anything like that. Now, some people say, well, hey, that's what it was like before electricity, or that's what it was like before modern electronic technology. Well, sure, but that was hundreds of years ago. You want to be progressive and say, look how forward moving we are. Well, that's that's part of the progress, technological progress in things like human comfort. So anyway, now, at the same time, or around that same time, I was talking to a friend's college daughter. She's probably about the same age, I guess, 20 years old, and we were talking. Now, keep in mind that she's too young to know what rents and mortgages and house prices were like 20, 30, 40 years ago. So she only knows today and has only been an adult for a very short space of time. So she's got sort of no wider reference. She could study it if she wanted, but she's not that type. She's not really that bright, and therefore very susceptible to indoctrination. And by the way, just as the backdrop here, kids that would never have made it into college, 30 years ago, certainly not when I was, in college or college age, they wouldn't have made it in there. They're just too dumb. But today we've got 50, 60%, or depends which country you look at, but between 40 and 60% of kids that start high school end up going to university. And so you've got this massive cohort of people who in real terms are just way too dumb to be going to university or any sort of tertiary education other than, say, community college type tech college, learning to be a plumber or a carpenter or something like that. That's a little bit different because it's not a theoretical process. You've got, for every 1 unit of theory, you get 4 units of practical, unlike university where you get 9 units of theory to 1 unit of practical. So it's a very, the ability to have the intellect to assemble pieces in your head, complexity, to understand complexity in the abstract. That's why only people of higher intelligence should go on to university, and they're able to make use of that education. But not many people have the capacity to think in the abstract. How many 5% of the population? I mean, very few. So no more than that really should be going to university. But instead, we've got 50, 60%. And this girl's one of the ones that's going to university, even though she should have, in reality, dropped out of high school when she was 15 and gone into to some sort of community college or tech college, as we call them in Australia. So So she's talking about, or I'm talking to her rather about, and I've got to be a little bit careful here. Her parents are reasonably well-to-do. They can afford to blow, twice the average wage on a vacation, and they can do that 3 times a year. So that's the sort of wealth that they have. So she already lives in a fantasy world in terms of wealth. She doesn't have to pay electricity bills. She doesn't have to pay for the car or the petrol that goes in the car, or she doesn't have to meet any of the expenses of life that allow her to fantasize about greening the planet and the world's going to end and all this sort of stuff. But trying to get her to, or seeing if she could, or would even make the attempt to associate or make the association with mass migration and high rents and expensive housing, or Green New Deals, like alternative energy and high electricity prices or high, petrol prices, fuel prices. Could she make those associations? And it's sort of interesting because she treats, and I assume she represents many of the kids around her, she treats mass migration in the same way, with a degree of that it's absolutely inevitable and natural. So as much as night follows day, or that water is wet, or that boiling water is hot, or that sort of thing, she with that level of understanding and belief of, again, the absolute inevitability of this night follows day. She accepts mass migration as being a night follows day issue, that it just is. It is so. And she cannot comprehend a situation where there would not be mass migration. And if you raise, well, the mass migration is fairly recent. It didn't used to be anything resembling mass migration. That because Hitler was in charge. That's why. So there's these glib, silly, ridiculous, childlike sort of answers come back. But she doesn't. She will accept that, as sort of, if you explain it. So, do you? No. The high house prices and rents. It's only because the government won't build enough houses. It's the government's fault, and the government won't do it because they're scared of Donald Trump. What? And it's that type of thing. So it's got these one-liners, these talking point type one-liners. It's because of Hitler. Oh, Trump did it. And this, the Conservatives, the Republicans did it. And so it's got absolutely no concept of reality there. Now, if you sort of talk it through long enough, she will accept that if more and more people are looking for houses to rent, then the rents will go up. And sort of, I say things like, well, there was a queue of 60 people to view one single bedroom property in downtown Sydney. Do you think that's a lot of people? Oh, suppose, maybe, could be. Yeah. It's Trump's fault, though. And so she'll try and do it. So she'll avoid dealing with any reality. But okay, so you accept that more people looking for property, in this instance, property to rent, will cause prices to increase. So she'll grudgingly accept that because she knows that, she's smart enough she's got that unique sense of irresponsibility that current times breed, where if you answer a question or accept a question or deal with a question, you're actually committing yourself to a situation, and thus you may have to accept some responsibility for something. And which is widespread at the moment, whether you're talking to customer service people online or folks at a pharmacy, or it doesn't matter. They're all now have that mentality of, holy shit, how can I avoid responsibility? Or commitment, as it is in this case. So she will accept that, but she won't accept that that stopping mass migration would therefore reduce the price. So she accepts more and more people looking for places to rent. Okay, it will cause the price of rent to increase. But okay, so if we stop mass migration, then there'll be fewer people looking, therefore rents would decrease. Oh no. That only Hitler would say that. The government just has to build. So she won't accept that mass migration can be stopped or should be stopped. She sees this inevitability that it's a night follows day issue. And I've seen this, not simply in Australia or the US, but around Europe, particularly World Economic Forum flunkies, European Union flunkies, wherever you've got globalist control, which is the universities and United Nations, all that sort of thing, they come out with the same set of talking points, that mass migration is inevitable. And even she came out with the classic talking point. There's a lot of people in the world, the third world, a lot of people that want to come to Australia, and why shouldn't they? And that sort of attitude. So she won't accept that mass migration is a political option that the government is taking, under the control of the globalists, and twisted into it by the globalists. But she just won't accept it. Again, it's that night follows day. Now, in terms of the greening, the Green New Deal and alternative energy that's costing vast sums of money, she struggles with this because she goes, well, the sun is free. The sun's free. Well, how can you say that it's more expensive? Because the sun is free. Then you sort of have to go into the technical stuff, and it's easy to get caught up in the weeds here, but in the technical stuff where it's okay, well, the sun isn't free because you need methods of capture. The solar panels, they have to be made. Then you need the cabling and the wiring and the distribution mechanisms, all that sort of stuff, so that has to be put in. And so, unlike a coal-fired power plant where you get one central location of energy production, which is then distributed, with solar power and wind, you have thousands of places of energy production, and thus vast amounts of cabling and separate construction. So it's actually very expensive to do. Is the original source, like the sun, free? But the cost of capture and distribution is massive, and therefore it's more expensive. So, okay. And you'll see a sort of, now you'd think that she would have been taught that or told it, or it would have been, but I could see from the look on her face that she never even thought about that. Sun's free. So very, very simplistic, which is in accord with her low intellect, but nonetheless. But trying to get her to accept that the reason we have high energy prices is because capturing alternative energy and distributing it is very, very expensive. Therefore, the subsidies required to make it artificially viable are what's making the much, much cheaper coal-fired electricity, what's making that more expensive. Now, she's unaware that China and India are really the two biggest emitters of greenhouse gases, so-called greenhouse gases, but she blithely waves that away. So, well, that doesn't matter because it's all white people's fault anyway, and because white people caused the problem, they have to show leadership in stopping it, and then the others might, the Chinese, the Indians might stop it. So again, she blithely waves it. She won't accept this idea that, well, shouldn't China and India stop their emissions? Oh, no, it's white people's fault. So she falls back on that, and it goes back to the Nazis, and so on. So very ideological take on things, but it shows that it's almost impossible to detach these kids from, the college kids, or even the high school kids now. They're being radicalized. It's impossible to detach them from these ideological fantasy viewpoints until they have to accept responsibility for something themselves. This is why it's so vital, I think, for the globalists to capture young children before those children ever have to face any of the realities. So you indoctrinate them before reality bites. So, for example, this boy, the young man, he's like 20 years old, the college kid who had to start paying for electricity. That's the first time in his life he's ever had to face a reality. Previous to that, he's existed only in fantasy, but now he has a reality to face. And as soon as he had to face that reality, or within a short time after he had to face it, his behavior adjusted. And you mentioned, Green New Deals and that sort of stuff now, and he's got a different view of it because reality had to bite. Now, the young girl who talks about mass migration, she lives in an environment, her parents have enough wealth where day to day, other than at college maybe, she never sees a brown or a black face. And all her friends are similarly well-off white people and so on. But if her parents would just say, well, you have to pay for that car now, well, you have to pay for the electricity, and you have to pay for this, and you have to pay for that, you have to pay for your mobile phone, and all this sort of thing, then it would be different. But but it may be many years before she ever has to face anything that would resemble a reality, and therefore she can exist in the fantasy and hold on to these ideological views. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.